little sizzle reel to play first before we kick off.
Let's do this.
Sit back and listen to it.
I look like the guy from the Goonies. We love it.
We're lifting Dougie into space.
Someone tell me what the hell is going on here? People love a bit of behind the scenes.
Start if you want.
Hey, Dougie! Yay! That's a lot!
Lift off.
I'm now going to show you something you've never seen before.
Freeze! And freeze! Hello.
Oh, put some undies on.
Oh, no,
Finance bros are actually extraterrestrial beings.
They've come from a country called Ukraine. Hello, squirrels.
I love this.
Bye-bye.
Go on, that was pretty good, though.
Hi, I'm really pleased to be here today and welcoming Helen O'Donnell, who's Head of Development at BBC Studios. I want to be really honest with you up front. We are going to give you some Bluey content. I know that's what you're all here for. It was going to be Jasmine that was speaking here today, who lives and breathes Bluey and absolutely loves its bits. Unfortunately, she's ill today, so Helen stepped in last minute, so thank you so much for doing that. I think potentially Jasmine was mainlining Bluey yesterday and got a bit poorly. But yeah, so thank you, Helen, for joining us. So Helen creates and launches new content with digital creators. You work with the likes of Joe Sugg, Joe Wicks, Sam and Nick Chapman, and you also champion youth within the BBC. And I'm really pleased that you're here today.
Great, yeah, thanks for having me, guys. I'm really excited to be here when I woke up this morning. This is not what I thought I would be doing, but it's really great to see all your smiling faces and to chat about Bluey and the other amazing shows that BBC Studios makes. As you said, yeah, I work with creator talent, predominantly at BBC Studios. So that's forging the careers of people, potentially their creator talent online, and we work with them to take them from short form to long form. A lot of what we're doing is looking to launch incredible global IP like Bluey. So yeah, that's my role, and I'm excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
And I'm Jocelyn, so I'm Associate Director at Propeller Group, and I've spent my career working in PR and content. So we are going to give you some Bluey content, don't worry. We're also going to talk about how BBC Studios works with creator talent, particularly young talent, and we're going to talk through some of that today. So let's dive right in. So anyone that isn't familiar with Bluey, essentially it's a family programme about a dog called Bluey, her sister and her family, but it is so much more than that. I've never seen adults get so emotional about a kids' programme before. I've seen grown men reduced to tears about some of these episodes. It's really, really good. I think one of the beautiful things about Bluey is that it can capture the imagination of both adults and children. So I was going to dive straight in with a question about that. So what do you think is the secret to making entertainment that resonates with both adults and children?
Yeah, I think when you watch Bluey, you can see that it's not a preschool show. It really is a family show that is very multi-generational, both in the characters that we see on screen, but also the types of plot lines that they explore. I think if you think of something like The Simpsons that really does resonate with all the family audience viewing, that's what Bluey manages to do. And it's because it talks about a lot of authentic storylines that feel very relevant to global audiences. So things like squabbles, the death of a pet, dealing with difficult friendships. They're very global themes that Bluey deals with in its very own special way. But really, that's something that's relevant to all of us, which is what I really love about it. And then the additional is this imaginative play. That's how it is. The themes are explored within Bluey. I'm not a parent myself, but I know my friends that are parents see that as a way of, they can see themselves reflected in some of the characters in the show. Why it's become a huge global hit is something that people are constantly asking. I mean, you can listen to podcasts, read Guardian articles about this. Like, why did this one in particular break out? I'm sure if you in the audience are a fan of Bluey, you might have your own thoughts as to why this one particularly popped. But I think it is that piece of authenticity about the show. And then also the fact that the global fan base took it on as their own. The amount of user-generated content that we see in the digital division, specifically created around Bluey, whether that is their own birthday cakes, right through to their own toys or colouring insets or costumes that they make, it's incredible. And on top of that, we've then got a celebrity fan base. So we've got people like Ryan Reynolds and Natalie Portman really vocally and creatively talking about them being a fan of the show. So it sort of hits all those key pillars in terms of if you were to put a media campaign together about traditional media talking about a show, creators and fans themselves talking about a show, influencers, and then more traditional celebrities. That is what Bluey has, which is totally unique. To BBC Studios, we are absolutely, completely proud of this show. And it really does keep to the creative vision at the heart of it about creating, as I said, a family show. So something that we can all, whatever age the audience is, you can feel like there's something for you in that episode.
Yeah, I think that's the thing that I've always thought about it, is that you can always see a part of yourself in it. And I read about how the writer of Bluey had watched other children's shows and seen how dads in particular were represented. So you had like Daddy Pig, who is just useless at absolutely everything. He goes for a little walk and he falls into the swimming pool. Like, he tries to put up a picture and he knocks the wall down. Like, he's just rubbish. And you've got people like Homer Simpson as well that falls into that same trope, whereas the dad in Bluey is just so relatable, but he's so nice and kind and he spends so much time with his children. So I think having that relatability for families, it more accurately reflects who they are.
And again, I think you could write absolute PhDs on this, but if you think about it in terms of every generation has had youth content which specifically talks to like that generation's style of parenting or like what parents relate to in a show. And I think that's why Bluey absolute hits right now as well in terms of its attitudes towards parenting and a family unit.
Yeah, and I think what I really love as well about Bluey is, well, I've got a little girl, so it's on constantly in my house, but what I love about it is that it's funny, but then it also tackles really serious topics, like you mentioned earlier, like the death of a pet or parents breaking up and things like that, but it handles it in such a unique and gentle way for children, but also I think for adults it just softens the blow a little bit because we all have to deal with these things in our life. What do you think other shows and other content creators can learn from putting humour into their writing?
Yeah, so I think Bluey, absolutely, the like humour piece really cuts through, and you can see that in terms of like children being in absolute stitches over this show, but also older generations really can see that relatability through it themselves. I think there is a lot of truth in comedy, so a lot of the comedy comes through in the mundane. Like, if we think of some of the funniest episodes of Bluey, they're quite simple in like the comedy hits. So if we think of something like whale watching episode, where we know that the parents have had a big night the night before and the children decide that they want to play whale watching whilst dad is lay on the floor as part of the boat, you can see that there's so much simplicity in that in terms of literally just wanting to lie on the floor and your children wanting to go on an incredible adventure in your living room. There's a lot of simple, relatable comedy in that, and I think that's what we can learn from. In my job at studios, we get lots of pitches for comedy shows all the time, not necessarily just family shows, but things for older audiences. And comedy teams sometimes keep coming back to like, how many times is it going to make me laugh? Like, if we look at in the first 3 pages of the show, how many laugh lines are in this so that I know it's a comedy? And if you haven't made me laugh in the first 3 pages, then maybe this isn't the show for you. If you see a Bluey script written out, there are so many moments of humour, both in the sort of the way the script itself, but also like the looks between the parents, like the way that they do it physically as well in the comedy. It's really special, and that is the way to look at it. Like, where are these laughter points throughout the show?
Yeah, I've definitely had a few of my own whale moments at home after a big night out. But so we were talking earlier about how, well, and you also mentioned just now that celebs really love all of this sort of content, especially the family stuff. And the Minogues and a few different celebs have done readouts of Bluey online. I don't know if you've seen them, but they're brilliant. Different celebrities reading shorts around Bluey. And the Kylie Minogue, Danny Minogue read one about sisters. So this is an example of how you work with early stage creators and big creators, influencers. So tell us a bit about how you work with them. You've got Creator Labs. I'd love to hear a bit more about that as well.
Yeah, so the digital division within BBC Studios is focused on how do we make these shows relevant for a global fan base and give fans more opportunities to connect with the show they love. So whether that's through live events, it could be through physical products, it could be through publishing. In the digital division, they've done that in a lot of really interesting ways. It might be through showing you how to do crafting around Bluey. Like, a lot of Bluey is about play, so how encouraging ways that you can play around Bluey that doesn't include the original animation. So this is original commissioning. And then, yeah, the Bluey Reads is a really fun thing that the team put together. The publishing, there was some books, and we got well-known celebrity faces to do the audio reads. So for a talent, it's quite an easy ask, because all you need to do is be able to access a recording studio. And for us, it's a really special way to be able to connect Bluey with that audience. So we had people like Tom Daley do the book reads, Saran Jones, and then, yeah, like the Minogue sisters. As massive Australian talent, and Bluey being our massive Australian talent, it felt like such a good match made in heaven. At Studios, I run lots of projects specifically about how can we identify creator talent online and make them pop within long-form media. So we ran a project recently called Creator Lab in partnership with TikTok, where we found 100 new talent across TikTok who could potentially pop in the future across 5 different genres: cooking, sport, kids and family, entertainment, and nature. And what was interesting about the kids and family talent, so these are people that are currently creating content on TikTok, but could potentially be a creator of a show like Bluey in the future. We work with them to nurture them at an early stage. One thing that was interesting about the panel before, I thought, was this word nurture. Like, what are we doing as an industry to make sure we nurture new talent in order for them to succeed in the future? And Creator Lab is a project like that. So we commissioned short form content from the talent that can then go out on a BBC platform, but then also just gave them lots of other information about how the media industry works. In our role, there are a lot of gatekeepers, so commissioners, exec producers, script editors. We all know this. If you're a talent creating content on TikTok, you don't have any of that. You can create, edit, market, and distribute your content without having to converse with anybody else. So a lot of what we do is breaking down the barriers of that so that we can ensure that future creative talent will come and work with BBC Studios.
There's probably quite a lot of safety in that, isn't there? Because especially I can imagine in kids and family talent, I'm interested to know how you scout for those, because I guess you have to be quite mindful of like safety and brands, safety of what they're going to say, and make sure that they're not going to say anything inappropriate. And there must be, for the creators, like there must be a lot of opportunities for them to put their foot in it when they don't have all of that background of like people looking after them.
Yeah, I guess, but then also like talent are talent, and if you want to be a future talent in the children's space, a lot of it is sensible in terms of don't swear online. Think about the sorts of brands that you're collaborating with. Think about your tone of voice when you speak. And I think the people that succeed within connecting with the youth audience do tend to be quite good at that stuff in terms of making sure that they know how to build an authentic relationship with their audience. Also for us, some of the content creators that we work with online, it might not be their face or their tone of voice that is actually on screen. So, for example, we work with a talent called Libby Mulligan, who creates stop motion animation on TikTok. So her character in her creation is stop motion animation. It's not necessarily her doing it, but it's incredible to see that level of creativity being online.
Yeah, I love that. I haven't seen that. I'll have to look it up. And then you worked with, you kind of work with more established talent and teach the new entrants how to do that. So you've worked with Munya Chihuahua, Zara McDermott, and inspire the other creators. Can you tell us a bit about that as well?
Yeah, so at studios, if we think there's like loads of talent that BBC Studios works with, right through from like David Attenborough on the really established side, through to absolutely nurturing content creators at the other. Somebody like David Attenborough is incredibly inspiring, but to maybe a person creating content online, it feels like way removed in terms of how would I be making a sort of landmark natural history program. So somebody like Munya, do you guys know Munya Chihuahua in the audience? Some yeses, some maybe no's. Like, he's incredibly inspiring political comedic talent online who really does speak to youth audiences in a very quick way. He's someone who can create very quick content, which is very well thought through, and he is very inspiring to somebody who is like slightly further down their journey than, say, us bringing David Attenborough and say, hey, how do you fancy doing a sort of 6-part, 1-hour premium natural history program?
I'd be terrified.
It feels like an absolute, not only a gazelle leap, but I don't know, a bigger animal's leap to get to it. So that's why we use talents such as like Munya or Zara. They're really good examples of people who've been able to move their careers from online into long form media.
Yeah. And what I found really interesting was that it's kind of the way you work with creators. You work with a big show, for example, like Doctor Who or Bluey, and there'll be people already that are huge fans and that will already create content around that. And so I know that you work with, you've got a channel dedicated to Doctor Who, or the creator had a channel dedicated to Doctor Who, and they now lead the digital team there at the BBC Studios. Can you talk to us about the residencies programme and how you work with talent, place them in productions in that way?
Yeah, so I think that's amazing in terms of if you're an incredible fan of Doctor Who and you're creating content online, you will get noticed by people within the digital division, and that is entirely the sorts of people that we then want to work with. If you're an authentic fan of one of our biggest fandoms, you're exactly the sort of people who will then be able to create content that speaks to that global audience. We have a project called Creator in Residence, which specifically looks to recruit creator talent in and work with our production teams. An example would be, we had a lady called Layla Wright, who is an up-and-coming journalist. She went and worked with Mindhouse, which is one of the production companies that's part of BBC Studios. It's Louis Theroux's production company. And she worked there 2 days a week for 6 months. And as part of her residency, she pitched for a panorama, which then got commissioned, which Louis Theroux produced, but she hosted. So that was an incredible example of like her being able to bring her energy to a traditional production company like Louis Theroux's. She got her first panorama, which is like flipping amazing, but also Louis got a new project to go on his slate, so it's a real win-win. So at the moment, we're looking for talent in the comedy space, Top Gear, so automotive talent, and Doctor Who talent, people who are interested in those areas.
If anyone's interested. It must make the whole thing more democratic, because there must have been quite a small pool of people that you could access prior to this big sort of influx of new creators and new people that could push out their own content and the things that they were passionate about. It must be really lovely. Yeah. And how have you been personally inspired by the creators that you've worked with?
I absolutely love working with creator talent. Like, my job on a daily basis is finding people who have managed to forge a career in what is potentially a niche area. So, for example, as part of Creator Labs, I met a lady who runs a channel called My Mini Bakes, which is, she makes almost like, imagine like Sylvanian family-sized bakes. So like tiny little flour, tiny little whisk, tiny little oven, and then at the end of it all, there'll be tiny little donuts. It's almost like quite ASMR-y in when when you watch it, it is so relaxing as a piece of content. But she, pre-lockdown, was a event planner. So she worked in the live event space as a designer. And then during COVID, found that incredibly difficult. The work dried up. So she started almost like playing. This was her design project that she played with. And then once it hit 1 million followers, she thought, oh my gosh, I should tell people. So that is when she told her husband that she started creating this TikTok account. I just think, isn't that amazing that she then can support herself financially through that project, which is so inspiring and feels very artistic. I think sometimes when I talk to my friends outside of the industry, they feel like, oh, TikTok, it's just all people doing dances. And yeah, there are a lot of people doing dances on TikTok, but then there's also people that are fans of global fandoms like Bluey or Doctor Who, or there are people making tiny little Sylvanian family donuts, and isn't that great?
I love the idea of, I find it hard enough to explain to my family what I do, but I can't imagine that conversation. But I think we're at time now. But thank you so much for joining us today. I've really loved our conversation. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me, guys. Cheers.